Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the prospect for the Tories' former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher, to have to resign and whether or not Labour could win the subsequent by-election. Because if they could, that would be a massive signpost on the path to power. But it will be tricky. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So two parts really to this discussion. The chances of a by-election coming from this and Labour's chances of winning it. So I discussed yesterday the furore over Chris Pincher's latest assault and how Boris Johnson was absolutely insane not to remove the whip immediately. I said that he was going to have to, he was only making it worse by resisting. Well, Johnson eventually felt the full force of political gravity yet again, and the whip was withdrawn early yesterday evening. And because Johnson resisted doing so, doing what everyone could see what he would have to do, the situation is now much worse for him. Because here are the direct consequences of Johnson failing to get a grip. First, questions are being asked about why Johnson promoted Pincher in the first place, given his reputation. Johnson is trying to claim that he wasn't aware, but this isn't working. He was clearly aware. This is apparently not the first time that Pincher's had to resign because of this exact behaviour. In fact, he's even had to be referred to the police before because of this exact behaviour. Even in Theresa May's government, it was known about. This I didn't know, but it was apparently a long-standing issue. And that's the interesting thing as well. I didn't know before then. Now, that means that because of Boris Johnson's failure to get to grips here, now the story became much bigger and much more interesting. If he'd withdrawn the whip early on, yes, there could still have been questions to be asked about Boris Johnson and why he made him Deputy Chief Whip in the first place, but would they have captured the public attention quite so much? The second thing is that questions are being asked about Johnson's judgment. Everyone could see that the whip should be withdrawn and would have to be withdrawn from Pincher. Everybody except Boris Johnson. Everyone could also see that Johnson would have to do it anyway, even digging his heels in, and Johnson only saw this 24 hours after everyone else. Boris Johnson likes to say he gets the big calls right. It's a lie every single time. But some of the lies work. But every time he gets a big call clearly wrong, as he's done again, people may more critically consider their general view of these calls. And third, it's now a way bigger story. We've had more reports coming out today. Do you know what? Sunday tomorrow, the Sunday papers, what they're going to have. But we've had details of even worse offences on the part of Pincher. I'm not going to link the article in the description below because it's in the Sun and I've got my limits. But the revelations are just getting worse and worse and worse. It just turns out that this man should never have been anywhere near Parliament. Never mind Deputy Chief Whip. We've got another report that confirms that Pincher had a minder. He was given a minder to make sure he didn't keep getting too drunk and into this sort of trouble. Obviously backfired, well not backfired, but didn't go well last week. I imagine the minder couldn't do their job because he was at a private club, and if the minder wasn't a member, they weren't getting in. But apparently it was reported a while ago that this minder existed, that some MP needed a minder to stop them getting drunk and into trouble. And it wasn't known which MP it was. Now we know it was Pincher. It's been confirmed. This story's getting really bad for the government now. So bad, in fact, that there exists the possibility for Pincher to have to resign as an MP or face an investigation, which actually could see him recalled. I was thinking to myself, even yesterday, there might be a Standards Committee inquiry here. It might recommend a suspension, but it may not be a very long suspension. Just a few days out of Parliament, that's it, done. No real hassle. This could end up being quite serious. If evidence comes to light and the Standards Committee have to issue a suspension of sufficient length that he faces a recall petition, he would lose that. So that means another by-election. Another by-election. And this one could be very, very tasty. Actually, it's also one that Boris Johnson has the best chance of winning, but it's very interesting. Because even if this doesn't happen, right now, Chris Pincher could end up being the bursting of the dam of Tory sleaze here. He may end up being like the Neil Hamilton of this era, the focus for everything rotten in the Tory party if they stick by him. So right now, they could really have a choice. Stick by him and be tarred with the same brush, or jettison him, but then have a by-election. Now, I don't want to say that it is inevitable that Pincher will have to fall, but there is now a very strong possibility, which means a by-election. But this by-election would be very, very interesting. It's Tamworth. Now, over the years, this has been a seat that's been held by loads of different parties, but mostly the Conservatives. But Labour did win the seat in 1997, and then again in the other two general elections that they also won. They held on to the seat during every general election win for Labour of that last government. Then in 2010, when Labour fell, so too did the seat to the Tories. So if you look at the results from the last general election, in isolation, you think, oh, this is a comfortable hold for the Conservatives. Pincher got 3 times as many votes as his Labour opponent. This is not going to be an easy seat to win. And I know some will be thinking, yes, but the Lib Dems have overturned bigger majorities than that. Yes, they have. But they have an advantage over Labour. Dissatisfied moderate Conservatives, the so-called Conservatives with a small c, do not mind the Liberal Democrats. It's way easier for a Conservative voter to switch to the Liberal Democrats than it is to Labour. In fact, if we had proportional representation, a great many of those Conservative voters would vote Liberal Democrat anyway. The reason they don't is because, first part, but you sort of know that the government's going to be formed by either Labour or the Conservatives. So it's really a choice for most voters between the two. But they don't mind the Liberal Democrats. You know, many of these voters, they vote Conservative not because they're aligned with the party, even in normal days, but because they believe Labour would be the greater of the two evils from their point of view. Just as there are people who vote Labour as the anti-Tory vote, so too there are people who vote Tory for the anti-Labour vote. It's much harder to convert these voters to Labour. But, and it's a big but, it has happened before. This place has voted Labour before. So the major question for me is, has the demographics changed a lot for Tamworth since Labour were in it? Because if we take the examples of the by-elections of North Shropshire and the more recent Tiverton and Honiton, now in both those cases, Labour were coming second, but there was no point in them trying to fight those elections because Labour attracted the residual left-wing votes, but these were mainly right-wing areas. There simply weren't the numbers ever for Labour to win due to the demographics, no matter how unpopular the Tories were. No chance. But if the demographics of Tamworth have changed significantly since Labour were last in power and tilted much more towards the right, then it may still be impossible for Labour to take the seat, but they will still need to fight for it. But if this isn't the case, if the population is much like the late 90s and the noughties, where they will vote for Labour if they believe that they'd be the best party, then Labour could have a shot at it. And I'll be honest, my hopes are not high. Because right now, Labour are not firing people up with policies. They're wanting to keep their powder dry for the general election rather than announce a load of policies now that then have to be changed for the manifesto. So they're trying to avoid the cries of U-turns. I still say they could have their cake and eat it if they were to be clear that they have policies for all the problems we have in the here and now, but that they will change them to reflect the needs of the country in 2.5 years' time when the general election rolls around. They could have the best of both worlds. Like, just say, look, for this problem, if we were in power right now, we'd do this and it would have these benefits over the current government's policy. But this is for the here and now, they should say. It's not a manifesto promise, just what we'd do in power right now if we found ourselves having to deal with this Tory mess. You know, but they're not doing that. They have some definite policies, but just not enough. But the by-election would be a great trial run for them. I know that people keep saying that right now Johnson can't actually win a by-election. It's not quite true. He did win Old Bexley and Sidcup, remember, last year. But this is a seat, it's probably more true to say he'll struggle to win a seat where the Lib Dems are on offer to say to all the moderate Conservatives votes, look, give us your votes. Different matter with Labour. But this is a seat that Labour would need to target to win a majority. Like, if they want to win a majority, I don't think they're likely to get a majority. I barely think it's even possible. But if they were to target it, and they say they're targeting it, this is the sort of seat they need to target. You know, so they have to fight for seats like this. Well, a by-election in a seat like this would allow them to really put their campaign strategies through their paces. Even if they ultimately lose it, they would get a lot of valuable information from the experience. And if they make major inroads into that Tory majority, they could still claim that it shows that on their way back, it's like, okay, if we can come close on this seat now, imagine what we can do in 2.5 years' time. And if we can come that close on this seat now, imagine what we're going to do to a load of seats that are not that close. And I know some people would at that point ask, so why can the Lib Dems seem to not lose a by-election against the Conservatives, but the Labour, it's more balanced? Seemingly oblivious to the fact that the Lib Dems occupy the ground between Labour and the Conservatives, but they'll just have to take that on the chin. But if Labour could win, that would be massive. That would be the biggest win. Now, if Labour could win this seat, it would show that they're ready for the general election right now, and they've still got more time to prepare. Tory MPs would see it instantly. Yes, publicly they'd say, oh, you know, midterm blues, oh, you know, by-election, blah, 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 like they have for all the others. But privately, they would know, even if Labour run it close, the Tories would know the game's up. This isn't a red wall seat that Labour are taking back. You know, we know that the Labour have this laser focus on the red wall, and they need to take the vast majority of those back. It's not a seat that's basically been Labour for generations, and the Tories just nicked it the last election. You know, this is a seat that Labour have only ever held when they've been in government. To even come close to taking it again would mean that Labour are well on the march again. But like I say, I think Labour will struggle. Without some really solid policy promises, I think they would struggle. But it would be a fantastic opportunity for exercisers to sharpen themselves up for the general election. But if they could win, that would trigger some real panic in the Tory ranks. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.